Welcome to our noontime briefing. My name is Matthew Wright. I'm the Deputy Director of the Science Press Package at AAAS. And our briefing today is U.S. Inventors Shake Up Innovation. And our speakers for this briefing, joining us remotely, is Lisa Seacat DeLuca, Director and Distinguished Engineer at IBM in Baltimore, Maryland. Juan Gilbert, Andrew Banks Family Preeminence Endowed Professor and Chair of the Computer and Information Science and Engineering Department at the University of Florida in Gainesville, and Rory Cooper, Founding Director and BA Senior Research Center Scientist of the Human Engineering Research Laboratories, and FISA Foundation and Paralyzed Veterans of America Foundation Professor at the University of Pittsburgh. We will first hear from our speakers one at a time, and then we will open the floor to Q&A. And a reminder that we must wrap up at 45 minutes after the hour promptly, then so we can prepare for our next event. And at that time, our speakers should be available for a quick follow-up across the hall in room 208. That should wrap us up for the intro. And now our first speaker, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Hi, guys. I'm over here in Baltimore, Maryland. Happy Valentine's Day. Like the intro said, I'm a distinguished engineer and inventor at IBM. I've been with IBM for about 15 years now, and from my time at IBM, I have submitted about 1,500 patents. So about 100 patents a year I've been going through. Of those, as you all know, the process can be a little slow. So I've gotten 500 have been granted so far to date. There's a bunch still in the works. I think there's about 750 that have been filed as applications. So I'm excited today to talk to you all about what we're doing at IBM around innovation, getting more women inventors and more diversity around our inventors. And yeah, I'm excited to see what the other panelists say as well.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Juan Gilbert, as previously mentioned. And as a professor, my area of research is what we call human-centered computing. I deal with people and technology, policy, and culture, and integrating those to address real-world or applied problems. And so from my perspective of invention, we've created new technologies and things that some are transitioning into the real world. And when I say we, that's myself and my lab, a very diverse group of inventors. For one example, we worked on an innovative voting technology, a voting system that is universally designed so everyone, independent of your ability or disability, can vote using the same technology. And there's some other examples of things we worked on, so if you want to know, ask me about those. But I think it's essential that we diversify the invention space. We need more ideas from more people. And that helps not only those people, but it helps society in general. So I look forward to the conversation.
Great, thanks, Juan. Hi, Lisa, how are you? I'm Rory Cooper, and I'm an inventor as well. Not as prolific as Lisa. I have about 25 patents awarded, over 100 inventions, and several patents still pending. I do. You might not see it right now, but I am a veteran and use a wheelchair due to a spinal cord injury I received in the service, and my work is to develop technology for people with disabilities and older adults. Some of it is quite ubiquitous. Some of my algorithms and some of the controls are in every power wheelchair used in the world. And as a matter of fact, it caused Medicare and Medicaid quite a problem in the early 2000s because we made it possible for the number of people who could drive a power wheelchair to quadruple, which their funding didn't quadruple at the same time. And we also work on robotic systems to allow people to work and to be mobile in their community and to live life as independently and as healthily as possible.
Okay, short and to the point. We will open the floor to Q&A now.
inventors. What's this for each of you, based on your experience? What is in recent years the state of the patent system in this country? Are things getting better for inventors, or is the paperwork and all the other entanglements end of things getting worse?
Lisa, you want to go?
Sure, I can jump in. So as being an inventor that's part of a big company like IBM, 85% of all submitted patents come from a for-profit organization like an IBM, and we've got 27 years of patent leadership as the company. So, that doesn't really touch the inventors of IBM, the paperwork and all the extra processes. That's going to be the IP attorneys that help to write it up. So it's not getting to the inventors to cause us to slow down or change the way we are inventing.
If I can follow up on that, that's a situation within one big company, which is one of the best situations in the world. But my question is about the patent system, the patent office, and the regulations and the laws, where in the news there floats up from time to time news that regulations are getting much more complicated, or they're getting less complicated. What's been your experience on that?
I haven't experienced that the rules have gotten more or less complicated. I think they've stayed about the same. I think really the challenge is in many ways, although Lisa's navigated this very successfully because they have an excellent team at IBM to help out. Academic institutions are challenges. We don't have large teams of lawyers, and so the inventors have to do a lot of the legwork themselves.
This is getting at the question I'm asking. If you were to, anybody can thrive if you have enough 1,000 lawyers on your side. But that aside,
right,
the news used to be filled not so long ago with stories about how there are backlogs growing and growing at the patent office. That kind of thing. Is that end of things getting better or
there's
worse?
still a pretty big backlog, largely because there's more and more people submitting inventions. The number of inventions just keeps growing and growing, and of course the staffing at the patent office has grown as well, but not at the same rate. And I think that's part of the challenge. So I think the real challenge, actually, if I would point out, is individuals that are sort of individual entrepreneurs or inventors that don't have access to big resources. And so I know, like in our university, for example, they tend not to file a patent unless there's an excellent chance that there's a licensing partner. And so there may be a strong patent there and intellectual property there, but they're also looking at whether somebody's going to bring it to marketplace. Normally, I don't think that should be a criteria for deciding whether to patent or not. But if you have limited resources, then of course it becomes naturally a criteria, which I think is a challenge faced by individual inventors and largely inventors that don't have access to resources, which is kind of the point of the lost Einsteins. If you have, if your parents have more money and you are able to take risks, then you're more likely to become an inventor or innovator and then file for patents. I think that's also true if you work for a big company like Lisa, where intellectual property is a high priority for them, then you'll file a lot of patents. I know in my case, I've probably invented over 1,000 things, but only the university's only filed for patents on about 25 of them because they don't see necessarily the commercial return. The other thing is that in academic institutions, you don't necessarily think about whether there's sort of viability for a company to be formed or to license such technology. You're trying to advance science and science. But to kind of get back to answering your questions, I do think that if you are a small minority-owned business, that the the cost of filing for a patent, mostly the attorney's fees, related attorney's fees, can be prohibitive and discourage people from becoming inventors or inventors.
That was my question. Are things for you guys all work for big institutions, but for the small companies, which is a lot in this country, are things getting better or worse in that?
I would say they're getting worse, but not because of the patent office, but because of the complexity it requires now to file, largely because of the large number of patents and prior art that's available. So on one side, I guess one part's easier, and that is the fact that there's searchable electronic databases for free for patents that have been filed and awarded, and therefore you can do a lot of prior art search work yourself. And there also are resources online where you can search scientific papers to look for prior art as well. The challenge is, though, that there are millions of patents now and literally tens of millions of peer-reviewed publications that could potentially nullify your patent. And so that in itself makes it more difficult and increases costs. And then I think on the other side of it is that because of that, you need to pay, basically you have to have an attorney to file nowadays. I think the days of an individual inventor filing a patent themselves are few and far between.
Yeah. I've done it as a pro se inventor. So even though I'm part of IBM, I wanted to try the process of my own, and I did it. I successfully got some patents out of it for areas that were not aligned with what IBM was pursuing. But it was hard. Like if any regular person who comes with an idea, they would have to have a patent attorney. I think I only really understood the process because I'd been through it so many times watching the attorneys that were helping me as an IBMer. So it is difficult, and I don't think that's changed. It's always been difficult, like just the way claims are worded, right? There's an art to it, which regular people who might be the inventors, they're not experts in that space.
Okay. I have a quick question. Lisa, you in your session tomorrow, of course, will be discussing best and worst practices for nurturing an invention culture. I wonder if you might be able to give us a quick preview, maybe even pick out the top one item or bits of wisdom you might be able to share from each of those lists. What is a best and a worst?
Yeah, if you guys haven't heard of the IPO Innovation Toolkits on gender and diversity, check it out. It was developed by the IPO Women in IP Committee, but it's a whole handout that you can send your organization to help encourage more women in these larger corporations. So it talks to the fact that 53% of PhDs are actually going to women, but yet only 12% of patents are recognized inventors as women. And there's some really interesting findings that it references about women and inventing in teams. Even when we have women inventors, they're in a group of male inventors as well. But it talks about how to encourage more people to start inventing more women and more diverse teams, and what to do from there. So check that out. And then at IBM, we're always doing special events. This month is Black History Month. We've got a number of events within our company where we're highlighting those groups and helping to nurture them, pairing them with master inventors who've gone through the process before, helping them to shape their idea and get it through the process in probably a form that's readable, so it's not the way they submit it, but actually the idea that's judged.
Okay. Check in the audience. Okay. One, I had a question you might be able to address. Currently, of course, we're in an election year, so it's very much top of mind for a lot of folks and the media as well. As the inventor behind Prime 3, where do you think that system fits into and of course we've got a lot of media coverage of the patchwork of different voting systems in this country. Where does Prime 3 fit into that ecosystem?
Well, Prime 3 is at the core of it in many respects. It is, when I invented Prime 3, I did it in 2002, and the goal at that time was in response to the Help America Vote Act, HAVA. And when HAVA was released by Congress, they had a requirement that every precinct voting place would have at least one accessible voting machine. And I said, that's a problem because you're setting up a separate but equal way of voting, and that's not going to work. And unfortunately, I was correct. It caused problems. People would show up to vote and say, I need to use the accessible voting machine. The workers, election officials would say, oh, it's in the corner over there. We don't know how to set it up. And there were issues with it. Now, fast forward, at the time that I was doing this work, they said, well, we can't have one machine that everyone votes on. And so I went out and did it. And I never patented that technology. I wanted it to be in the open domain. So part of the work that I do, I have one patent, and I have maybe 3 pending. But a lot of the work I do is in the open domain. And so now there are several universally designed voting machines out there. And the nation's largest voting machine manufacturer, ES&S, created the machine modeled after our technology. And so you see more of this now. And there's questions about security that we're addressing. We have a new invention, a new machine that we're going to launch this year to address some of those things as well. But yeah, I think it's at the core. You see it out there. It's in the real world being used. So yeah, we've changed voting in the United States.
Okay. Rory, I'll direct a question to you as well. You and your collaborators have a very patient-focused approach to your work. I wonder if you could just I guess, comment a little bit more on how that philosophy informs your thinking on a day-to-day basis.
Well, we like to think of it as a consumer-focused rather than patient-focused because patients are people being treated in a hospital or some sort of clinical setting. Most older adults or people with disabilities are living in the community, and our focus is to try to help them live in the community, live as full of lives as possible. One of the things that I've tried to do, I'm a firm believer in this approach that we call participatory action engineering or participatory action design, where you have to involve the end users from the conceptualization, ideation of what the problem is, all the way through to designing the product. What I found really exciting is when I went to school, for example, I was the first person in a wheelchair to study engineering at California Polytechnic State University, and found that by engaging people with disabilities in our research, that they also were interested in going to college and becoming scientists and engineers themselves, and not only participating in research but leading research as well. We find that true of the veterans community as well, especially veterans who become wounded or ill and want to help veterans like themselves and other veterans. And so by incorporating people with disabilities and older adults on the team and making them part of the team, you can come up with much better products and services than you can by excluding them. And actually, I've been part of a group that's been arguing that on grant peer review panels, that there should be representatives of the target population on those grant review panels. And the Department of Defense has now initiated or incorporated that process, and now Paralyzed Veterans of America Foundation just decided to do that as well. I would hope to see that NIH and NSF will do the same thing, because that will encourage science and engineering that and innovation that includes the target population, so that we spend less time creating things that don't necessarily help people or are not on the focus of what people would like to have achieved or worked on. So it's been a really interesting learning experience for me because I have now a large number of people with various disabilities working in our center as scientists and engineers. And of course, I have my own perspective from my own disability and the people that I know, but everybody else brings perspectives as well. just like Lisa was talking about women in science and engineering. There's got to be a culture as well. What I find exciting is in the United States, there are 3-year-olds that get powered wheelchairs, which are essentially mobile robots that they drive. And so you think about it, by the time they get to college, they've had nearly 20 years of experience using robots, whereas your average college student doesn't have any experience until they get to graduate school. And so the amazing amount of experience, or you think about children who are nonverbal and they use augmentative alternative communication devices to speak, and they might start at 4 or 5 years old. And so their ability to understand the strengths and weaknesses of text to speech or gesture to speech is vastly superior to most of the students who are starting out learning about that when they get to college. The hours of experience, the years of experience they have, and the practical knowledge. And I think it would be a tremendous loss to the United States unless we take advantage of that and provide opportunities for those children as they become adults to become inventors and innovators, whereas they can change society. And if you think about it, so speech to text was actually created for people with disabilities who had limited use of their upper extremities. And now it's widely used by basically pretty much all of us that talk into their smart devices of some kind. And so you're losing an important part of the population unless we provide them with opportunities to participate in STEM and then use their creative talents to help all of us have better lives.
Well, I think that's a great segue. I would wonder, I'll pose this to everyone. What are some of the best strategies we can employ to target children at that very early stage of their education, their intellectual development, to get involved with invention?
Well, I think the way to do that is to work with organizations such as Easter Seals and United Cerebral Palsy and Variety and things like, and there's certainly lots of other organizations, great organizations that work with children with disabilities, but are not typically engaged with the community of inventors and innovators. So they're innovators in providing services, perhaps, but not necessarily in developing new products and new services. And so they have access to the parents and the children as well. And of course, Shriners and hospitals or children's hospitals around the country or other mechanisms where you can engage these children. I think what's important, though, is to engage them in community settings outside of the clinical setting so that, and in a way that they get excited about science and engineering so that they and see the opportunities. I also think that we need to be at AAAS and other organizations like it because we need teachers to understand that these kids can become innovators and become scientists and engineers because oftentimes they orient these kids towards non-scientific or engineering fields of study.
Lisa,
And I think that's true across multiple sets of people, right? It's all about access and whether you're providing that access. A great example is my kids, they're after school. I have actually 2 sets of twins. So my boys are in 1st grade and my girls are 4, so they're in preschool. But there's an after school program called Future Makers, which is awesome. They're exposed to electronics, they're playing with it. But I asked the boys, I said, how many girls are in your class? He said, well, 1 table of girls. And I'm like, how many tables are there? There's 4 tables. So 25% already are limited, most likely from biases from their parents, not signing them up, thinking it's a boys club, or it's too expensive. The program was $150. So that's too much for our lower income students that are part of the thing. And then additionally, I think the way schools work in general, the fact that kids are getting off of school at 3 was stemmed from a long time ago when you've got one working parent and one at home. And it's really hard for getting more women into STEM when you've got kids coming home from school, or you've got that pressure that you're the one that has to stay home and watch the kids while your husband goes into work. So I think that there's a marriage between those two where we could have after school programs that are opening up for everyone to have access to technology during those after school times, which will help women continue their careers in STEM, and as well as expose more people to technology.
Yeah, I would add that those programs where you can have students or kids involved early makes sense. But I'd go a step further. I'd actually pose questions to kids. Kids are inquisitive anyway. And their ideas, they may not be something the kid can implement, but it may be a legitimate idea to solve a problem. The goal here in Invention, in many respects, is divergent thinking, coming up with something that no one else is looking at, the thing that's out of the box. Kids do that better than any other population. They're dreamers. They come up with stuff because they don't know the rules of what can't be done. And by not knowing what can't be done allows you to come up with ideas where many people who are older and experienced and been trained start with why we can't do certain things. So I think it's a huge opportunity to incorporate more kids in the inventive process early on, just for their ideas and their exposure.
I've often heard that inventors, scientists, and engineers are often just big kids in adult bodies. That maybe that's something we should encourage more of. I think that's a wonderful segue into another question. I'll make sure.
I wanted to
audience
add to
has
that
other,
question.
Yeah, please,
And
absolutely.
I think it's important too that we offer these programs in a mainstream way, so the kids with disabilities, from low-income families, and girls and boys are all together, so they're not isolated from one another, so that they can learn to work together, learn to invent together, learn to innovate together. And I also think that our schools are still kind of based on a factory type model, and could be, and we probably need to start shifting towards an innovation model where kids and teachers are encouraged to do more exploration, invention, and innovation.
Let's kind of look in the future, if we could, the crystal ball metaphor, and this new generation of kids has been nurtured and encouraged to develop their own intellectual endeavors. What does that future look like for you in an idealized situation? That's to everyone.
I'd probably say the Jetsons. I think we'd have all sorts of innovative things because, again, they're not bound. If you start earlier and these kids are coming up with ideas, we'd have inventions that I couldn't think of. And so that's the key, is invention comes from these places where you lack those boundaries and the kids don't have them. So I'm serious. I think we advance the state of technology pretty far, or in society in general.
Well, I would agree with that. Although Rosie the robot actually never did any work in the Jetsons, if you noticed that. But I actually think that we need to do this because we have a lot of global challenges facing us coming forward, and kids are going to have to solve them. I mean, kids, when they become adults, are going to have to solve them. It happens with every generation. And so I think my experience has been that the problems of science and engineering in society have become ever increasingly complex. And we started by arguing and implementing more team science, and even really large team science, to help solve some of the world's most difficult problems. But I think going forward, we need to start incorporating our children earlier on so that they can help solve some of these really big problems that are facing us. And it'll be, they're discussed here at the conference. And those are, some of those, I'm an engineer, so I think some of those will be, I think all of us are engineers actually. There's technical solutions, but these kids, if they have creative thinking, they'll hopefully be able to solve societal problems and scientific problems and technical problems, and maybe even learn to work better together than we do, and live better together than we do.
Lisa, anything to add to that?
No, I think they hit most of my points that I would have made. I'll bring up that at IBM, I started a new initiative. We started calling it white space, but now it's morphed into something much more. But the idea is that it's a competition, and IBMers from around the world submit ideas through the patent process. So the patent is that first round of vetting. If it's patentable, then they make it on to the next round, which is a business competition. So we look at our portfolio as a company and whether or not that idea that's going to be a patent, whether or not it's going to add a bunch of value to our business unit, and then we'll form a team around it and bring it to life. So I'm very excited about that because it's not enough to have the patent, right? It's got to have some sort of value beyond just the idea on a piece of paper. And that's what I would like to see more of our children and next generation see, is their ideas come to life. And because of the way technology is, how much easier it is to 3D print out something, right? That reality is starting to become possible today.
I'd actually like to add to that the VA has created a program working with us called the Technology Transfer Assistance Project, a program, and where they're actually reaching out to clinicians across the VA and saying, what are the problems and potential technical solutions that you have to solve the things that are facing you and the veterans that you're treating. And it's been really remarkable because oftentimes engineers and scientists who may be able to solve those problems are isolated from the people that are facing those problems. And now by opening up a mechanism for people to talk to each other and work together and putting resources behind it, I've seen really rapid strides in improving devices that are available for improving VA healthcare, veteran healthcare, in which it's the United States' largest healthcare system, and so therefore it should be helpful to improving all of healthcare, which we know we need to reduce healthcare costs and improve healthcare quality. And one way to do that, which we found out, is listen to clinicians and help bring solutions to the problems that are facing them, rather than trying to come up with something and then selling it to the clinicians.
Great. Well, that's a lot of really great thoughts on the inventors of the future. I wonder if we might take a slight detour and ask, what are some of the inventions of the future, the frontiers of invention that you all might be most excited about at the moment?
So I think I think one frontier is more human-centered approach. So focusing on what people's needs are and people's challenges and using that to develop new inventions. I also think future inventions are going to be focused on being small and on being really large. So small, like things you can inject in the bloodstream and things like that. If we go back to the movie analogy, right? And I also think inventions that are really big that solve global problems, like safe drinking water and safe sanitation and for that matter, affordable housing and things like that. Those are, I think, some of the. So I think you've got. If I had to predict, besides the Jetsons of the future, is that there's a lot of opportunity if you think really small and if you think really big.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think the technology I'm most excited about is AI, right? And with IBM's definition, we call it augmented intelligence, where you're helping people do the things they're already doing better, right? Help people do their jobs faster, make every experience you have a little bit easier. And one solution I'm working on, you're going to see a lot of patents from me in the coming months here, is around digital twin. So a digital twin is a digital representation of a physical thing. I like to describe it like an ebook, right? An ebook is the digital version of that paper copy book. But now, because of all of the things around us becoming connected, we've got IoT sensors. Now you can start to actuate. So as you're changing the pages in your ebook, your physical book pages can change too. And so I think that's the exciting thing of the future, is just the pure fact that all these things around us are connected.
Yeah, I would agree. I think AI is there's who knows what we're going to see there. There's all kinds of exciting work in that area. And then my own selfish thing is in voting. It's a hot area, and so much room for discovery and innovation. So I think that's going to be another topic.
Yeah, well, I'd argue that's not selfish at all. We all appreciate your efforts there. Do we have?
I'd just like to add too. I think
please.
that thing is that for people to become more connected. I mean, I think there's the risk with the way that we've moved along with digital communications, digital devices, is that people are not connected at a human level. And so we have to be careful that we essentially maintain our humanity as we move forward as well with AI and other technologies that allow people to be more productive. But we also have to remember that there's an important component to life is having human connections.
Yeah, we don't want the Ready Player One future.
Wonderful. I just want to check with the crowd one more time. Does anyone have any questions, anything they'd like to add? Okay. Well, I think at that point, we might just go ahead and wrap up a little bit early. We'll thank all of our speakers one more time for their time this afternoon. And yeah, please join them for the session tomorrow at 10 a.m. in room 611. Thanks again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Lisa.